Hey y'all, I'm back with another video, and this time we're talking about tracking spending and budgeting. Before we keep going, I do want to encourage y'all to hit the like and subscribe button if you're interested in this kind of content. So before I get started in showing you how I've been tracking my spending and the budget that I've created for myself, I did want to put on the table that this is the budget that I've created based on my circumstances. So obviously some of us have more, some of us have less, some of us started sooner, some of us started later, some of us are just starting right now, some of us started 10 years ago. We're all on different paths and we're all in different circumstances, and I just hope that my personal experience and this journey that I recently started can be helpful to even just one person, because I know for me, getting a hold of my finances has been really empowering, and so I really hope that I can share some of the things that I've learned along the way. And I would say this whole journey got started because I became really frustrated with feeling like I had no idea where my money was going. And so I asked myself that question, like, where does my money keep going? And it got to a point where I was like, I need to do something about this. And so the first thing that I did was I started tracking my spending, every expense, everything that I bought, I started writing it down, writing how I paid for it, how much I spent, where I spent it, when I spent it. And so that's something that I've been doing since March of 2020. And I want to share with y'all that yes, this was a step in the right direction and I needed to learn, my spending habits. However, I messed up because I never set limits to the things that I was spending money on. I was just tracking what I was spending money on. So for a while, I was, seeing some trends, but I had never said like, oh, well, I'm only allowed to spend $200 on groceries, or I'm only allowed to spend $100 on clothes for the month, or I never set limits. So I just was really just tracking my spending. And so I would say that tracking your spending is super important, but if you're not setting limits, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I'll begin by sharing my bullet journal where I've been tracking all my spending. And essentially, I do want to be transparent and honest in saying that really my more serious color-coded tracking started in September. So September, October, November, and December are very accurate when it comes to the category colors. And the rest of the months are not really as accurate because that was a system I put in place later. So let's go ahead and break this down. Y'all are seeing a lot of colors and a lot of numbers, and what does it all mean? So for here, so I guess I'll start here. The colors that you see highlighted, blue is necessities. So for me, that means my phone bill, groceries, things that I absolutely have to pay for. And then after that comes transportation. So any kind of taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, anything, train rides, bus rides, anything like that is transportation. And then going out / eating out, so like going to the movies, going to the bar, going to a restaurant, things like that, that's going out, eating out. And then clothes, shopping, so any kind of shopping that I do, buy clothes, shoes, that's going in clothes and shopping. And then the last thing is gifts and helping out. So obviously every month I'm celebrating a friend's birthday, and so I'm planning for those gifts and really trying to prepare for the month. When those things come up, I already know it's in my budget. So those are the things that I've been tracking. And as you can see, these are the averages for the year. So based on these expenses that I calculated, so basic math here, right? So you see all the blues. I tracked for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. So I tracked for 10 months. So I added all the blues, all the these amounts on the left. I added them up and then divided by 10. And so I got this number, and I did the same for the rest. And so this is important because this really gave me a look at the amount of money I was spending every month. As you can see, I was spending a lot of money in various different categories. And so this was something that I needed to examine because I really needed to know, like, where do I want my money to be going and where is it going right now? So you don't have to track for as long as I did, but I would say that looking at the past 3 months would probably be a good thing to figure out how much of your categories, and you make your own categories, right? But I think that these have been really helpful for myself. Before I keep going, I did want to share something that it'll become apparent as you continue to see the parts of my bullet journal that I'm sharing with you. But the blue category, right, necessities, typically that would include rent, utilities, things like that. That's something that I never actually included, because before I moved back home, I was living in Boston, and that wasn't something I ever included in the blue category anyway, but that's because that's how I decided to track my spending, and obviously you can do it whatever feels, most helpful for you. But something that I wanted to share was that back in May of 2020, I did come back to New Jersey after I finished grad school, and so that is something that is unique to my particular circumstance. I'm sure you guys have heard of the boomerang generation, that after we finish college, we boomerang back to our parents' house, and that is something that I have done. And I will say that it feels partly good, partly bad, and I feel like part of me has internalized, I don't know, maybe some shame around why that is something that happens, why it's typical, why we find ourselves in these positions. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm super grateful to be surrounded by my family, especially in these chaotic times with COVID and people isolating and not seeing their family members for months on end. Like, that's hard, and I'm really grateful to be surrounded by my loved ones and for them to be healthy, and I'm so grateful for that. And I feel like I should have it together by now. Like, I feel like now that I have my graduate degree, I should be making an amount of money that feels like it's enough to support myself and to get me out of debt very soon, and I feel like it doesn't, or at least not right now. I'm not at that point where I feel very financially, secure. I feel like I'm figuring it out for sure. And so that's just something I wanted to share. And I'm very curious to know, how you all have handled the transition from finishing college, or finishing some sort of degree and then figuring out, what next steps look like, if it made sense to move into your own apartment, if it made sense to get roommates, if it made sense to, move back home. I'd love to hear, like, what that has looked like for other people. So I did want to share with y'all what a typical month looks like. I decided to go with the month of November just because it is a successful month for sure, and definitely one of my most organized months in my bullet journal. So here, as you can see, are the expenses, the transactions for the month, and then over here you see the categories for the colors that are highlighted here. And so I did want to get a little specific as far as like what you're seeing here. So for example, right, let's look at the second line, Duncan, and then it has a little A. The A is for the card that I used to make that transaction, and then here is the amount and the day that I spent it on. And then what I do is I move what's on this side over to this side, right, in their individual categories based on how I categorize my expenses. And then it all comes together down here where I'm adding up all of these totals, right? And then all of these are added up together to see how much I spent in total for the month. And then these here are the percentages. So basically, like, if you put this number over the total, you're getting the percentage that I'm spending for the category. So this is typical of every month that I've been tracking my spending. And so the next thing I wanted to share is, how do you learn the limits of what your budget should be? So as I shared earlier, I started this journey by just tracking my spending, and essentially what I said to myself was, well, I won't spend too much next month, but let's be real. what the fuck does that mean? Like, I'm not putting real limits, and thereby my money's just kind of like still doing its own thing, being controlled by my wants and desires and my cravings. And so that's not helpful. So what's something that I've actually done relatively recently was, like, once I calculated those averages that I showed you earlier, I've essentially decided, okay, how much money do I want to be spending for each category each month? And so right now, my February, so let me first show you my January budget. So here's the budget for January. This is the budget I decided on. $300 for necessities, $300 for eating/going out, $100 for transportation, and that's for transportation outside of the transportation I use for work, $100 for buying things, and $300 for gifts/helping out. And so it all comes to a total of $1,100. And so I wanted to share with you all what February's budget looks like. So I want you to note that it is the same budget total, $1,100. However, this time the quantities are spread out differently. So I wanted to share this because I knew February is my birthday month, so I wanted to, spend a little more money on this pink category. I knew I wanted to treat myself in some ways, and so all I did was change the quantities in different categories, and I ended up with the same budget total. So I wanted to, make sure that everyone is giving themselves permission to move around quantities or even increase the budget total if necessary, so that you're accommodating life and you're being realistic with the things that you need to spend money on as the months go on and different occasions and things come up. I'm trying to be really aggressive in paying back my student debt as much as I possibly can, because I want to get out of that as quickly as possible. Becoming this aware of the amount of money that you're spending in each category, eventually it becomes something that, you just kind of automatically do. You're not something that you think about super intensely about as like it will be when you begin. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Like, don't box yourself in. Like, if one month requires more money, like for example, December presents, you're going to spend more money on gifts than you are in, other categories. And so I would say, like, give yourself some space to make sure that you are spending the amounts of money that you're okay with for, whatever is coming up, birthdays or a special occasion. So you want to buy yourself a nice dress or some nice shoes or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure, like, give yourself permission to be flexible in your budgeting and the budgets that you create for every month. And maybe it is the case that at the end of this video you feel like, ooh, this girl's asking me to do too much. Like, why does she want me to limit spending on that and spending on this? Like, it could feel like pretty restricting at the beginning, just because, like, you're changing, you're adapting your habits to, become more efficient with your money. And so I encourage you to get creative with the activities that you do for fun, right? Not everything has to cost money. So, like, for example, you could go hiking, or you could arrange like game nights with close friends that you're already seeing. You can arrange like a Netflix party where you're all watching the same movie at the same time and making comments and things like that. Like, not everything costs money. And so I would encourage you to get creative in the things you're doing for fun. And so I would like to end this video with the concept of delayed gratification. And so what does that mean? Essentially, that just means putting in the work now so you can reap the rewards later. And I feel like a quote in the Total Money Makeover does a really good job of encompassing what that stands for. And he has a quote that says, "If you will live like no one else, later you can live like no one else." So I'm thinking about budgeting and how at first it can feel a bit restricting. It can feel a bit like a loss of freedom, that now you're not, using your money in the ways that you used to. And so I really want you to think about, you know, what are the things that you're working toward and how are you going to get there? Are you going to get there doing the things that you're doing right now, or do some things need to be tweaked? So I definitely think that thinking about this quote, if you will live like no one else, later you can live like no one else, is, you know, worth contemplating if you find that what you're doing right now isn't working, isn't serving you to the best that, you know, it could be. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And that is all I have for you for today. Please leave a comment letting me know what you thought, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.